David Whitmore wasn't the kind of guy who liked to stir the pot. He liked engines that purred, lakes that shimmered, and neighbors that waved but didn't ask questions. So when he launched his newly finished houseboat into the quiet lake behind his property, he expected a peaceful summer. He didn't expect a battle with a homeowners association he technically didn't even belong to. It started small. A man in khakis and loafers paced along the shore near David's dock, holding a clipboard and looking annoyed. David waved. The man didn't wave back, just scribbled something and left. That evening, taped to the door of David's actual home land was a thick envelope marked Urgent HOA Violation Notice. It was hand-delivered, not mailed. David opened it, eyebrows climbing. Dear resident, you are in direct violation of HOA Covenant 1 to be pertaining to unauthorized floating dwellings within the visual perimeter of HOA jurisdiction. Please remove the structure immediately or incur a fine of $500 per day, beginning tomorrow. David blinked. Wait, what HOA? David lived on a 10-acre property he bought years ago, well outside the official HOA zone by at least 400 feet. His deed said nothing about covenants, and his taxes sure weren't paying HOA dues. But the envelope said otherwise. Apparently, the HOA had updated its boundaries during the last annual meeting. Quietly, and with no notice, David stared at his houseboat, sleek, solar-powered, anchored securely to a floating dock, and sitting on a lake bed he owned. Not a chance, he muttered. The next day, a silver Lexus pulled up. Out stepped Karen Monroe, president of the Willow Hills HOA, heels sinking slightly into the dirt as she marched toward the lake. David was sitting on a deck chair atop his boat, coffee mug in hand. Sunglasses on. Karen cupped her hands around her mouth. Karen, you'll need to move that eyesore immediately. David, good morning to you too. Karen, it violates every visual code we have. It's disruptive and unattractive. This is a residential lakefront community. David pointed lazily toward the water. This lake, I paid for it. The deeds, in my name. You can't even fish here without my permission. Karen's nostrils flared like she'd smelled gasoline. Karen, we restructured the map this year. HOA guidelines now apply to all water-adjacent lots. You're adjacent. David stood up, slow and deliberate, and I'm telling you politely that your HOA doesn't apply to me or this lake. So either file a complaint with the county, or stop trespassing. Karen's eyes twitched. She muttered something about calling a special meeting, then marched back to her car. David watched her go, then walked inside and added cameras to his dock, just in case. 3 hours later, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Is that a boat behind lot 92? Looks like someone's building a lake shanty. Karen says he's in violation, hope he gets towed. David didn't respond, but he took a screenshot. Several, actually. Just before midnight, his motion sensor light caught a man walking along the shoreline with a flashlight. David didn't confront him, just hit record on the cameras and called it a night. By morning, a second violation letter appeared, this time in bold red ink. Final notice. Immediate removal required. HOA, legal action pending. David laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity had reached sitcom levels. He sipped his coffee again, walked down to his dock, and opened his laptop. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. Because what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that David had a surprise of his own. And it was anchored just a few signatures away. Think that HOA has got the upper hand. Think again. Stick around too. See how David flips the whole situation on its head. Smash that like button if you've ever had to deal with a nosy HOA, and don't miss what's coming next. Karen didn't waste time. By the following Saturday, a hand-printed sign appeared outside the Willow Hills Community Center. Emergency HOA board meeting. 10 a.m. All members required. Technically, David wasn't a member, but that didn't stop his name from showing up on the agenda item number 2. Unauthorized. Water structure, discussion, and action. David showed up anyway. He wore flip-flops, a Hawaiian shirt, and carried a thermos of coffee labeled "Not HOA Property." He sat in the back row, arms crossed, as the room filled with retirees, couples in golf polos, and one guy still holding a tennis racket. At the front stood Karen, hair sprayed into a helmet, legal pad in hand. Karen, thank you, everyone. We have a serious violation that threatens the harmony of our lakefront. A resident has erected, she paused dramatically, a floating house without HOA approval. Murmurs rippled through the room. Greg, the HOA secretary, a gangly Man in his 40s who always looked like he just woke up leaned over to whisper, "What even is a houseboat code violation?" Karen ignored him. "Karen, it obstructs the view. It sets a dangerous precedent. What happens if more people start bringing in floating structures? What next? Jet skis? A nightclub?" A woman in the second row gasped audibly. David raised his hand. Karen squinted. "You are not recognized." David lowered his hand. "Good, I'll speak anyway." He stood and addressed the crowd calmly. "My name's David Whitmore. I own the property at the end of Lakeview Drive. And also, by the way, I own the lake bed up to 20 feet out from my shoreline. This is public record." He opened a manila folder and pulled out photocopies of his deed. "David, there is no rule, legal or otherwise, that gives this HOA the right to tell me what I can float on my own water." Greg took the papers, squinted at them, and whispered, He's not wrong." Karen snatched the documents. "We'll let our legal team review these." David grinned. "You mean Diane, the board treasurer's niece who just passed the bar?" Karen's face flushed. Someone in the back coughed, trying not to laugh. The meeting devolved into chaos. A woman argued about duck migration. A man named Barry asked if he could start a fishing shack. Someone brought up a paddle boat from 2017 that nobody had resolved. In the middle of it all, Karen stood stone-faced. "Karen, this is about the principal. He didn't ask permission." "David, I didn't ask because I don't have to. You're mad because you can't control it." The room went quiet. That hit a nerve. Karen called for a vote to pursue legal action against David. Half the board abstained, one voted no. Greg, still Googling floating structure law USA, didn't vote at all. The motion failed. Karen slammed her folder shut. David walked out of that meeting whistling, but he didn't go home. Instead, he drove to the county clerk's office with a copy of the HOA charter and maps in hand. He asked a simple question: who owns the lake access points? Including the marina. The clerk tilted her glasses and pointed to a folder labeled private. Commercial lease. The marina wasn't owned by the HOA. It was leased, and it was up for renewal. David smiled. Who owns the lease? The answer was better than he could have hoped for. A week later, David was flying to Florida to meet the couple who owned the lease. They were in their 80s and had moved years ago. Tired of board meetings and bickering. They'd never even met Karen. David offered them double what they were asking just to sweeten the deal. They accepted immediately. He owned the marina now, and he hadn't even told the HOA yet. Karen thought she'd won a moral argument. She didn't realize David had just bought the chessboard. "Oh, you think the HOA drama's peaked? Not even close. Tap that like button if you're rooting for David and stick around." Next up, the sheriff gets involved, and someone's about to get seriously embarrassed. Karen Monroe didn't take humiliation lightly. The failed vote, the public embarrassment, the rumors flying across the Willow Hills Facebook page, all simmered beneath her perfect smile like a pot ready to boil over. So she did what any HOA president might do when their power feels threatened. She called the sheriff. It was just after 9 a.m. when David heard gravel crunch in his driveway. A black and white cruiser rolled up behind his truck, slow and deliberate. Sheriff Tim Walters stepped out, one hand on his belt, the other holding a file folder. David met him halfway, coffee in one hand. Calm grin on his face. "David, morning, Sheriff. Trouble?" "Sheriff Walters, got a report of an unpermitted structure in the lake. Says here it's a hazard to the community." David tilted his head. "Hazard? The ducks love it." Walters smirked. He'd dealt with Karen before. She once reported a Halloween skeleton for inciting fear in children. David led him down to the dock, handing over a second mug of coffee. "Figured I'd see you eventually." The sheriff took his time. He examined the floating structure, walked its perimeter, even peeked inside. The place was spotless: solar panels, water filtration system, composting toilet. A full off-grid setup that any park ranger would have applauded. "Walters, you got paperwork?" David handed over a copy of the deed, environmental impact approval, and local water usage rights. Sheriff Walters whistled. "Well, you're definitely more prepared than half the people in my department." Then he pulled out the HOA complaint. "Walters, this says you're obstructing shared resources. That true?" David pointed to the shoreline. "I own 30 feet of the lake bed from that point out. That shared resource is privately deeded and legally mine." Sheriff chuckled, shook his head. Sheriff, you know they don't realize that, right? They just think if it's wet and pretty, they can control it. David, Karen's favorite quote is, if we let one person bend the rules, everyone else drowns. Sheriff, fitting. Still, I gotta file this. Can't ignore a formal report. David, file away. Just make sure to note it under Karen being Karen. They both laughed. But David knew this wouldn't be the last knock on his door. Back at the HOA clubhouse, Karen was fuming when the sheriff's cruiser rolled away without issuing a citation. She stood in the parking lot, fists clenched, watching him wave casually as he drove off. Inside, board member Greg was nervously scrolling his phone. Greg, Karen. The neighborhood Facebook group is kind of blowing up, Karen. About what? Greg hesitated. The sheriff posted a photo with David. Caption says, smartest houseboat owner I've ever met. Karen's jaw clenched so hard. Greg actually heard it. Then she snapped, Karen, call a press conference. Post an HOA bulletin. Issue a safety alert. We are not letting him win. But David wasn't focused on Karen anymore. He was working with a contractor to clean up the marina he now owned. The old signage came down. The dock was sanded and repainted. The leaky boathouse got a new roof. He even installed a floating cafe, complete with umbrella, seating and a dog's welcome policy. Locals loved it. Kayakers from the next county over began showing up. David greeted them all with free coffee, samples, and loyalty punch cards. And not a dime went to the HOA. Karen's next move. A printed flyer posted to every mailbox in the community. Marina in danger. Unauthorized operator may be skirting safety codes. Residents urged to avoid until HOA approval is restored. Except, David wasn't unauthorized. He owned the lease. He owned the land under the docks. He even had a signed fire inspection and a personal thank you note from the local Parks and Rec department. David added those to the community bulletin board at the cafe, under a handwritten headline, in case Karen confuses you again. But Karen wasn't done embarrassing herself just yet, because her next plan involved a surprise inspection, a faked complaint, and a security camera with night vision that caught someone very familiar creeping around the marina. And the fallout from that, well, that's when things really got interesting. Don't even blink, Karen's about to go full sabotage mode. And David's got the footage to prove it. Hit that like if you're loving this story and stick around for part 4, it's about to get personal. While Karen obsessed over flyers, complaints, and Facebook comments, David was doing something far more productive. He was asking questions. Specifically, questions about the HOA's beloved marina private dock area with boat slips, paddleboard racks, and a covered seating area where retirees like to gossip over lemonade. Everyone assumed the HOA owned it. But assumptions, as David had learned, are dangerous things. It started when David pulled up the county parcel map. A few clicks later, he spotted something strange. The marina lot didn't list the HOA as the owner. It listed Crown Lakes Holdings, LLC. A few deeper searches revealed the LLC belonged to a couple named Marvin and Eileen Becker. They'd owned the land for 40 years, and hadn't lived in Willow Hills since 2009. Karen's HOA, they didn't own the marina, they leased it, and the lease was up for renewal in less than 60 days. David, well now, that's interesting. David made a call. 3 days later, he was sitting on a screened-in porch in Florida, sipping iced tea with Marvin and Eileen, who were delighted someone finally cared enough to ask about their property. Eileen, we're retired now. We're just looking to get out of the paperwork game. Marvin chuckled. You ever seen one of those HOA newsletters? She sends one every week. Had to block her emails. David smiled. I'd like to buy the lease and, maybe the land outright. Cash. Eileen, bless you, son. The paperwork was signed before sunset. David flew home owning not only the lakebed but, now the entire marina. But David didn't say anything yet. He knew Karen would eventually find out. He wanted her to feel it first, so he quietly began upgrades. Power washed the dock. Added string lights. Planted native flowers. Installed signs with new hours, pricing, and one small addition, property of Whitmore Lakeside Operations. All rights reserved. Karen noticed the changes immediately. She stormed into the clubhouse in full blazer on clipboard mode. Karen, why is there a flower box by Slip 6? That's not HOA approved landscaping. Greg, still regretting ever joining the board, glanced up from his laptop. Says here the marina isn't technically HOA jurisdiction anymore. Karen blinked. Karen, what? Greg turned the screen so she could see. Public property records, lease transfer, legal filing stamped and signed. Karen, that can't be right. That's our marina, Greg. Nope, it's David's. Karen stormed down to the dock. Nostrils flared and heels wobbling on the boards. She marched straight up to David, who was helping a young couple tie up their PADDLE-BOARDS. Karen, you can't just take over. You can't privatize something the entire community depends on. David turned, smiled, and pointed to the new sign. David, actually, I can. And I didn't privatize it, I just stopped giving it away for free. Karen, you're exploiting us. David, I'm running a business. You're welcome to use the dock. Just need to fill out the reservation form online. And pay the new slip fee. Karen, you'll hear from our legal team. David, I hope they bring coffee. I've got new benches going in Monday. That night, David checked his security camera footage as he did every evening, just to be safe. At 2:13 a.m., a figure crept down the side trail beside the marina, flashlight in hand. They crouched near the control box for the dock lights and tried opening the padlock. David zoomed in on the video. It was Nancy Pritchard, HOA treasurer, wearing all black and Crocs. David, you've got to be kidding me. He didn't call the cops. He didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he edited the clip, added subtitles, and uploaded it enlisted to YouTube with the title, "When Your HOA Sends Ninja Accountants After You." Then he posted the link to the Willow Hills Neighborhood Facebook group with one sentence. Would love everyone's opinion on this exciting nighttime performance. The post had 124 comments within an hour. Nancy resigned the next morning. Karen. She didn't respond. She was too busy planning her next move, because she didn't care about rules anymore. She wanted revenge, but what she didn't realize is David was already 3 steps ahead, and he wasn't playing defense anymore. Caught red-handed, and it's only getting juicier. Hit like if you're loving this takedown and stick around for part 5. The HOA is about to declare war on David's, bringing the receipts. Nancy's resignation sent a ripple through the communities, some relieved, some stunned, and a few just disappointed they didn't get more popcorn before the Facebook post blew up. But for Karen Monroe, it was war. No more forms. No more meetings. No more passive-aggressive notes. She was done playing nice. David had humiliated her in front of the entire HOA, bought the marina she considered the crown jewel of Willow Hills. And now people were tagging him in community group posts, like he was some kind of folk hero. Karen made a decision. If the law wouldn't help her, she'd bend it until it snapped. That very evening, Karen summoned the board members to her living room, her version of a war room. Greg arrived with a frozen pizza. Diane brought a binder and a bottle of Chardonnay. Karen slapped down a new proposal on the coffee table. Karen, Emergency Board Resolution 108, Retroactive Zoning Enforcement. If we reclassify the marina and shoreline as protected community aesthetic zones, we can demand conformity and revoke any incompatible permits. Greg blinked. Can we do that? Karen, we make the rules. Diane squinted. That's not exactly how zoning law works. Karen cut her off. This is about principles. Greg whispered to Diane. She's gone full HOA Napoleon. The next morning, residents woke up to HOA flyers stuffed in every mailbox. Emergency Ordinance Update: Marina under Arrivi activities. Rentals and floating structures are temporarily suspended pending community aesthetic compliance. David found his crumpled in the dirt. He shook his head, walked down to the Marina Cafe, and hung the flyer under his chalkboard menu. Today's special, Karen's kombucha, goes down bitter. Lingers forever, $5. Customers loved it. But things got more serious later that day when David's mailbox was stuffed again, this time with an envelope marked legal notice. Inside, a formal cease and desist from the HOA board, threatening legal action for non-conforming shoreline development and unlicensed operations. David laughed, but only once. Then he called Jorge Alvarez, attorney at law, preferred sandals over shoes, and had an office above a surf shop 2 towns over. He took one look at the letter and asked the only appropriate question. Jorge, are they serious? David, dead serious. Jorge, perfect. He drafted a response using terms like frivolous, retaliatory, and good luck proving jurisdiction over water. He even included a map with an arrow and a note that said, "This is where your authority ends. This is where David's dock begins." They mailed copies to every board member and posted it on the community Facebook page with a caption. If you're going to try and sue someone, at least know where your HOA stops. Karen was not amused. The next day she filed an emergency motion with the county zoning board, hoping to force a hearing. But it backfired, turns out. The Marina's commercial zoning had been locked in place for years under a grandfather clause. By trying to challenge it, she triggered a review of the HOA's own land use compliance. Now they were under investigation. Greg, so, technically, our clubhouse patio violates the 10-foot easement rule. Karen, nobody needs to know that. Greg, the zoning guy, already posted it on his TikTok. Karen's eyelid twitched. Meanwhile, David was throwing a sunset launch party for the Marina's newest attraction, a floating yoga studio. Local news showed up when the reporter asked about the HOA conflict. David just smiled. David, we've got a peaceful spot, a growing community, and a few stubborn folks who don't like change. But around here, we let the water settle things. And settle it did, for now, but Karen wasn't done. She had one last card to play, and it involved David's personal records. A trip to City Hall, and a plan so bold it could blow everything wide open. The legal tricks failed. The zoning play backfired. Now Karen's going off the books. Click like if you're Team David and stick around for part 6, because the next move is illegal, bold, and caught on camera. Karen Monroe had always believed the rules were hers to write, bend, and enforce. But now, the rules were breaking under her. The Marina was gone. The board was fracturing. Her threats laughed off, so she stopped following rules altogether. And she didn't know. David had cameras everywhere. It started on a Tuesday at 3:41 a.m. David's phone buzzed on his nightstand, motion alert. He opened the security feed, half asleep, expecting a raccoon. Instead, he saw a figure in a hoodie and black gloves. Crouching near the electrical panel by the Marina's dock, David sat up fast. He zoomed in. The person cut a small wire, then jammed something metallic into the control box. Narrator. The dock lights flickered out. The cafe freezer tripped. The Marina's power backup buzzed like a wasp nest. The figure bolted, but not before glancing straight at camera. #3. That glance sealed everything. It was Karen. David didn't panic. He simply copied the footage onto a flash drive, brewed a pot of coffee, and watched the sunrise from his boat deck like nothing had happened. He didn't call the cops. Not yet. He posted a quiet message on the Willow Hills Facebook group later. That morning. Power outage last night. Looks like a vandal was poking around near the docks. Footage sent to authorities. If anyone recognizes the shoes, red sneakers, size 7, feel free to DM. The comments section exploded. Nancy from her burner account, who wears red sneakers to a break-in. LMAO. Greg, size 7. Uh-oh. Karen didn't comment. She couldn't. She knew she'd been caught. That night, David got a knock on the door. It wasn't the sheriff. This time it was Greg. Greg, can we talk? Off the record. David raised an eyebrow but waved him in. Greg, listen, she's losing it. Karen's trying to get access to your building permits, tax records, even your old divorce filings. Said she was going to expose you publicly. David, for what? Owning a lake and a blender. Greg, she's obsessed. We think she's planning something worse. David, too late. She already sabotaged my power line. Got it all on video. Greg's jaw dropped. David sipped his coffee. Want to see? The next day, David filed a formal report with the sheriff, handed over the footage, and quietly CC'd the county commissioner, the zoning board, and because he had a flair for drama, the HOA's own insurance provider. 3 hours later, Sheriff Walters called him back. Sheriff, well David, she's toast. David, just save me a copy of the mugshot. But Karen wasn't arrested right away. She sensed something coming and decided to go on offense one last time. At 4 p.m., HOA members received a mass email from her personal account. Urgent. Our community is under attack. David Whitmore has secretly manipulated our systems, stolen our marina, and is driving down property values. Please attend a mandatory emergency HOA assembly tomorrow at noon. Signed, President Karen Monroe. Only 12 people showed up. Greg brought snacks. Karen brought a slideshow titled How to Stop a Tyrant. It included a graph labeled, Marina, Drama versus Community Happiness. Greg whispered, "Is that a stock chart?" Meanwhile, David was busy printing glossy flyers for his summer lake night festival, hosted at the Marina. Free live music, food trucks, paddleboard races. Silent, disco on the water. He titled the event, Celebrate Community, Leave the Drama Onshore. Local businesses donated prizes. The town mayor, RSVP'd, even the sheriff said he'd drop by. Karen saw the flyer, crumpled it in her fist, and stormed back to her car straight into a parking violation ticket from her own HOA, security patrol. Greg had reported her for double parking. Karen didn't show up to the festival. The sheriff's department did. With a court summons, David watched from the dock as Karen opened the envelope and turned pale. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just turned and helped a kid onto a kayak. The crowd cheered, music played, and for the first time in weeks, peace returned to the water, caught on camera, in her own shoes. Karen just crossed the line and now she's sinking. Click like if you're loving this takedown, and stick around for part 7. Because she's not done yet. She's about to make one final, desperate move. Most people would have backed off after being caught on camera sabotaging a power box. Not Karen Monroe. She didn't just double down, she launched a full-scale legal offensive. In her mind, she wasn't losing. She was fighting for the soul of Willow Hills. But the soul of Willow Hills wasn't on her side anymore. The court summons arrived on a Monday. David stood on his porch as the process server handed him the papers. Thick packet. Big red stamp. Civil complaint HOA versus David Whitmore inside. A mess of accusations. Illegal acquisition of Marina property, public nuisance via unauthorized structures, defamation of HOA board members, and the best one, emotional distress caused by online bullying. David, guess I better wear a tie. He called Jorge. Jorge Alvarez was thrilled. Jorge, oh man, this is gonna be fun. I haven't crushed this much ego since that crypto landlord tried to evict a goat. Rescue. David, is that a real case? Jorge, don't ask. Court day arrived. The courtroom was packed. HOA members, reporters, curious neighbors. One guy even wore a Team David t-shirt. Greg showed up with popcorn and no shame. Karen strutted in with a binder as thick as a phone book and a face like she'd already won. Her lawyer, a stiff, pale man named Mark Doolin who looked like he'd been hired from a strip mall tax office. Doolin, Your Honor. This man's reckless disregard for HOA policy has resulted in disorder, public division, and loss of community cohesion. Judge Simmons raised an eyebrow. Community cohesion. Doolin nodded. Our HOA was once unified. Now it's in chaos. The judge turned to David. Mr. Whitmore, do you have anything to say? David stood up calmly. I'd like to enter a few things into evidence. Jorge handed the bailiff a USB stick and a folder. Exhibit A, David's property deed, showing legal lakebed and marina ownership. Exhibit B, the lease transfer from Crown Lakes Holdings, notarized. Exhibit C, security footage of Karen tampering with the dock control box. Exhibit D, the HOAS owned by, clearly excluding David's parcel from jurisdiction. Judge Simmons flipped through everything with barely concealed irritation. Judge, let me get this straight. You tried to sue him for owning property he legally bought. And because he made kombucha jokes online. Karen stood, flustered. Your Honor, the point is he's mocking the integrity of this community. Judge, you broke into a power box and shorted out his equipment. Karen, that video was taken without my permission. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Judge Simmons slammed the gavel once. Judge, case dismissed, with prejudice. Karen, but Judge, and if Mr. Whitmore chooses to pursue criminal charges or a civil countersuit, I'd advise him to start with Exhibit C. We're done here. Outside the courthouse, David was mobbed by neighbors. One elderly woman handed him banana bread and whispered, "We've been waiting for someone to put her in her place for years." Jorge lit a celebratory cigar, outside the legal limit zone. Of course. Greg held up his popcorn and said, "So? When's the next festival?" David just smiled. Karen didn't go home that day. Instead, she drove straight to the HOA office, pulled down every bulletin, every newsletter, every binder she ever printed. No one helped by the time the sun set. Her title plaque had been removed. Greg posted a picture of the empty office online with the caption, "Breaking. Dictator abdicates throne." But just when everyone thought it was over, David received one final email. From Karen. No subject line, no greeting, just one line. You may have won the lake, but you'll regret underestimating me. The war might have ended, but Karen She was planning a final strike. Courtroom victory, social collapse, but this storm isn't done. Click like if you've been cheering for David, and don't miss part 8. Because Karen's final move is desperate, bold, and ends with a twist no one saw coming. After the courtroom loss, most of Willow Hills thought Karen Monroe would vanish quietly into the homeowner's history books. Her credibility was gone, her leadership finished, and her reputation reduced to internet memes and banana bread gossip. But that last email said otherwise. You may have won the lake, but you'll regret underestimating me. David knew she wasn't bluffing, he just didn't know how far she'd go. It started subtle. Code enforcement showed up to the marina 3 days in a row each time, citing minor issues. Umbrella placement too close to shoreline, unapproved signage font. Dockwood doesn't meet new reflective paint standards. David recognized the game. Karen was using city channels to grind him down one ticket at a time. But what she didn't realize is David was already 2 moves ahead. A month earlier, when David finalized the marina purchase, he started a quiet process behind the scenes, petitioning the county to annex his lakeside property from the HOA-controlled neighborhood map. His argument: the HOA never legally included his parcel in the first place. The paperwork had been sitting on a clerk's desk, until now. The morning after the 3rd citation, David received an envelope from the county zoning board, inside : approved. David's single quotes, property and the entire lake bed surrounding it was now officially removed from the Willow Hills HOA jurisdiction. Karen had no more reach. Her last grasping finger had just slipped off the edge. But David didn't stop there. He filed a civil countersuit, claimed harassment, property interference, and reputational damage backed by video, police reports, and every HOA newsletter with his name in it. His lawyer, Jorge, thrilled. Jorge, we'll call it the Monroe Doctrine of self-destruction. Then came the twist no one saw coming. 1 week before the first hearing on the countersuit, Karen disappeared. No emails, no HOA messages. Her house silent. David thought maybe she'd finally moved. Maybe, just maybe, she gave up. Then he got a call. Sheriff Walters called David down to the marina. There, tied to the floating dock, was a small paddle boat, old, scratched, abandoned-looking. Inside it, a binder, Karen's binder. It had one label on the front, Plan K. If everything fails inside. Page after page of her wildest idea yet. A map with the lake divided into zones. Notes on building her own dock just outside. David's legal boundary. Names of private security contractors. A budget labeled HOA, Expansion War Chest. She was planning to start her own rival community on the lake. The whole thing read like a rejected Netflix pilot. David turned the binder in to the sheriff. Walters just sighed. Sheriff, she paddled out here, left this and vanished. David, do we think she's coming back? Walters, hard to say. Maybe she's halfway across the county by now, declaring herself admiral of some imaginary marina nation. David posted one final update to the Willow Hills Facebook group. The HOA era is over. The lake is open. The cafe is alive. Karen's gone rogue. Bring your paddleboards, not your pitchforks. Comments flooded in. Free coffee for life. RIP. OAN 2002 a 2025. Admiral Karen setting sail for delusion. In the end, David didn't just win the fight. He turned the battle into something better. The marina became a thriving hangout spot. Locals pitched in to build a public library box on the dock. Kids learned to fish there. Seniors did Tai Chi every Thursday morning, all without a single HOA regulation. As for Karen, nobody heard from her again, except for a postcard, sent 2 months later. No return address. Just a photo of a houseboat, drifting near an unfamiliar lake. On the back, one sentence: you were right about the water. It settles everything. What a ride! From lake wars to court battles, David held his ground and Karen. She paddled off into HOA exile. Click like if you loved this epic story, and let us know, what would you have done if an HOA tried to ban your boat?